Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Secure Connections podcast, brought to you by IOTSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. I'm Brian Sherman, your host for today's episode, Hack the Hype, Taking the Mystery Out of Cybersecurity. Joining us for this podcast is Amy Luby, Vice President of Channel Sales for Infogressive, a master managed security services provider headquartered in Lincoln, Nebraska. For those who haven't worked with Amy before, she has a deep-seated understanding of the channel and the issues MSPs face. She founded and built a formidable IT business of her own and later developed it into a successful master VAR MSP business, where she and her team supported providers across the world, stretching as far away as Australia and New Zealand. Over the past 8 years, Amy has helped build the channel sales and development teams for several organizations and earned numerous industry awards and accolades for all of the work she does on behalf of the industry. With that, let me welcome Amy Luby to the Secure Connections podcast. Good day, Amy.
Good day, Brian. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to today's conversation.
I am too.
Great. Amy, I always like to start off the podcast with a little background on our guests so everybody gets comfortable and understands where you've come from and your perspective on the channel. In this case, you and I go back a few years in the industry. I won't name the exact number of years, but it's been a little while. And I don't think I've ever asked you why you decided to pursue a career in IT. What motivated you to build your first VAR business?
Wow, we have gone back quite a few years. I was thinking about this morning, and I'm going to give you a super high overview of how I actually stumbled into IT, because I did stumble into it. I think I started somewhere around 1994 or 95, and I was working for a marketing company building databases. If you remember Borland's Paradox, that dates me a little bit. That particular company focused on auto dealers, and so I was doing a lot of marketing. You buy a car, send out a thank you, send out an oil change reminder 3 months later, et cetera, et cetera. So I was doing that. And everywhere I went, they thought, since I knew the database, that I might know how to manage their networks, and I didn't. So I went and got all my certifications that I needed to. And back in the day, that was an MCSE on MT40. And after a few years, I had a plan. I wanted to start a business, but I had little babies at home. And after 9/11, my husband got laid off and could not find a job for almost 8 months. And in that time frame, I, out of necessity, literally launched an IT services business. And there's a lot of detail behind that, but that's the short of it. I launched that business in March that year and went to a chamber event that I couldn't afford to be at and won my first client, and that was it. And never looked back.
That's great. And I know you've evolved through the channel. I mean, you've been involved in a number of successful businesses, and I kind of seen it from both perspectives too. So definitely appreciate your insight within IOTSA. So now we know a little more about your background. Let's kind of switch the talk to cybersecurity, IoT, and the channel, because I know you have a lot to share as far as insight, as well as a little more information on your company. So can you tell us a little more about Infogressive and the role of the master MSSP? Because that's a term that starting to see, but haven't heard a lot about it. And I'm sure the audience would like to know more about the things you provide and what they can take advantage of to grow their security business.
Sure. So first, a little bit of background about Infogressive. So Infogressive has been in business for about 11 years now, and has been what I would think is a pioneer in the managed security services space. They've been delivering managed security services under this recurring revenue model for 11 years now. Spent a tremendous amount of time building out a security infrastructure with both people, security engineers and experts, and technology infrastructure, which is expensive. And over the years, as cybersecurity really has come to the forefront, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit too, but as cybersecurity has become something that MSPs have to deal with today, we have become by default, or I shouldn't say default, we've acquired a good number of MSP partners simply because we've been doing it for so long and they've asked for help. And this spawned really the launch of our Master MSSP program and business. So that's a short little history of where we came from and why we're here. And you mentioned my background. The Infogressive business model has evolved similarly to how the Master MSP business model evolved. We had MSPs or break-fix companies in the early 2000s that were trying to move into a managed model. There were MSPs who were successful at the time, who then shared their expertise and their infrastructure with other MSPs who were trying to pivot. We're doing exactly the same thing, but with a security-only focus.
Excellent. Is there any particular service that MSPs are coming to you for, that they're searching, they're having difficulty in their own business and they're leveraging? I'm sure there's a variety of them, but is there one that is really the hot topic right now?
Well, security in general is a hot topic, as we all know. It's exactly why IOTSA exists today. I think that everybody, if you will, is trying to figure out how to deliver security well. So MSPs are looking for direction. They're looking for how to do this and what to do. What are the best practices? And what does a security business look like? And it's not just about one product or one service. That's been an historical approach to security, where we've looked for that one thing that maybe is going to help us prevent breaches and things like that. But today it's evolved to the point where we really need to take a layered approach. So MSPs are looking to find expertise, whether they're building it in-house or whether they're partnering with someone like Infogressive, to figure out how to deliver that layered approach and what are the layers and what do you do at each layer.
So you basically, it sounds like Infogressive is the complement to what an MSP brings to the table in security. You can boost and amplify their expertise and fill in any gaps that they may have. That's
exactly how we're approaching it, because most MSPs have some things in place already. Maybe they've got a backup solution, or maybe they have some email filtering, but maybe they don't know vulnerability scanning or SIM or pen testing, or maybe they don't have a comprehensive endpoint security management solution. So we really become an extension of their team, in effect. So the challenge, as I see it, for MSPs and for what MSPs are telling us is, how do we hire the expertise, or how do we learn how to do this? Do we need to get certified? What kind of software and tools and infrastructure do we need to do all of this? Where Infogressive has built all that stuff over the last 11 or so years and can quickly and easily deliver that through the MSP as an extension of their team down to their end users and clients.
So I hate to use the term, all in one stop, because it kind of diminishes the value of what you're providing. But it sounds like you mentioned penetration testing, advanced security services too. Are there a lot of those things that you're seeing more partners that are coming to you for and trying to implement with their customers today?
Sure. And I don't think, one of the things that I'm discovering as I'm getting to know our MSP partners that we have today, is that there are a lot of vendors right now that offer one or two things, whether it's SIM or whether it's vulnerability scanning or whether it's endpoint encryption or email filtering. And that's not everything, but they're offering one or two of these things. And I believe that one of our major value propositions at Infogressive is that, we've built the business to cover all of those layers. So we do bring, that all-in-one shop to the table to extend our MSP partners' teams.
That makes perfect sense, especially with, I know a lot of providers that I've worked with over the years have a diverse business, so they may not just have one vertical specialty, but dabble in, maybe dabble is not the right word, but have customers in various industries with different compliance needs, different security needs today. It sounds like Infogressive can provide them the services they need in each of those areas. Would that be a fair assessment?
Correct. Yes, that's a fair assessment. And when you start to go down the compliance road, one of the things that MSPs run into is that, in the different, regardless of the vertical, if you will, or the compliance regime, whether it's healthcare or finance or retail, whatever it might be, a lot of times some of these compliance solutions or activities must be done by a third party. So if you are the network management team, like an MSP would normally be, where a company's outsourcing the infrastructure management, they still need a third party to come in and actually test all of that, do the vulnerability scanning, do the pen testing, do the risk assessments. And so in this regard, we're still a partner of the MSP. And we can come in and act as that third party, but we're never going through or around the MSP. We're working in tandem with them. So it's a great way to keep the customer without having to introduce a third party that maybe you don't know, or maybe that could be a threat to your MSP business.
Sure, makes perfect sense. So what do you find are the typical challenges that most MSPs are encountering when they deliver security services to their clients today, Amy?
I think so. The biggest challenges are really security is expensive. The engineers that have expertise in cybersecurity are not cheap. And there's not a lot of them. There's way more bad guys out there than there are good guys. The technologies are complicated and they are expensive as well. There's not a concept in true security of a set it and forget it type of scenario. Security is a 24/7 initiative where we want to be watching and responding and defending in real time. So those are the big challenges. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's difficult to build that roadmap unless you have the expertise in-house to do it. So I think those are the biggest challenges, really.
That's a great point. I know I was listening to Carl Polachek. I know you know Carl well. His State of the Channel address yesterday. And it ties in perfectly because Carl gets asked a lot of times is when's the best time to hire a technician or a security specialist or others. And many are more focused on that than building the business side. And his recommendation is always get your administrative assistant, get your ducks in order on the process side before you're adding all of those expensive components and the business. So it seems like, master MSSP would be able to provide a lot of those services rather than investing up front in your own money is utilize what you need from your partner community.
Exactly. Yeah, Carl's a great guy and he's straight on target with that. I mean, if you consider there's literally zero unemployment rate for security professionals today.
Sure.
I mean, and they're, one of the challenges in hiring security professionals, or really any professional with expertise in an area like that, is when you're building the business, they're not going to be 100% utilized in that area. So how do you attract people who are well paid today into something where they've got to build? So it's just, and that's just a build the business concept to think about. But yeah, we've got that backbone in place, that team in place, 24/7 to help our partners really build their security practice.
Yeah, I think that was one of the discussions at the at Channel Con for CompTIA last year. In one of, I think it was a security community, they were talking about the employment issues. It's an issue only from the provider space because in many cities they cannot attract proper talent because you're competing with enterprise companies, especially in the larger cities and large providers. And there's a host of people. Everybody needs security specialists. So
right.
Before they try to compete for that talent on their own and even build the business afterwards, it's so much easier to leverage the available resources in the channel first before making those large investments. So great. How can MSPs get better at protecting their clients, Amy? Fighting the bad guys who seem to be getting stronger and more creative, I think is the bigger part. I don't know they're necessarily getting a lot stronger and a lot more of them. They're just getting smarter with some of the phishing schemes, for example, and other ways that they're trying to dupe what would be end clients for the channel.
Right. I mentioned earlier that there really is no silver bullet in security. So, having one thing, you've got really smart bad guys out there, and the threats that are coming into networks today, a couple of 5 to 10 years ago, the response was, well, we'll just have a good backup and disaster recovery plan, and then we'll be okay. But now we know that it really doesn't matter. You can re-image that machine, but that threat is laying there dormant and it's waiting. So those kind of point solutions are no longer effective like they used to be. It's got to be a layered approach. It has to be, and it's being forced on us now based on what kind of threats that are out there. So in my mind, in our mind, there's cybersecurity, the approach, the layers, all of that. It's no longer like a nice to have thing. It's a must have. And we've got to be super offensive about what we're doing and get proactive about it rather than waiting for something to happen and then respond.
Some of that still have the perception of it's only the enterprise companies that get hacked and targeted.
Oh, yeah. With ransomware, that is no longer the case because anybody is a target. And we know statistics today, over 50% of small businesses have been breached already. Over 70% of small businesses are the targets today. So, it's no longer, yes, getting the big, huge enterprise breach and having that claim, the bad guys can claim they got into some really big thing, that's great. But small business data is really important to them. And so ransomware has changed that whole landscape, because I don't care if you're a $500,000 business or a $50 million business, that data is important. And if someone's got it, the best way to approach that is to prevent it from happening in the first place, rather than trying to fix it after the fact.
I find a lot of MSPs spending more and more time trying to educate their not just their prospective clients, but their current clients on the urgency of continuing to invest in their security systems, and that's one of the challenges. Like, yeah, it's not going to be me. I'm not Starbucks, if I'm a small local coffee shop or something, but they continually look at themselves. They're not looking at it as I could be out of business part. They're looking at it as I'm not a prime target, and why should I invest in that? And that's one of the challenges I've heard many providers expressing. So I can see we're leveraging more channel partners, including master agents can be extremely more cost effective for them to deliver those solutions.
Right. Yeah, we find, I think the statistic is 85% of small businesses that do have a breach and lose data go out of business. They just can't survive that because it's too hard, too expensive to recreate it. I mean, if you lose your client list right now
Yeah.
and you never can get it back, how, I don't care if you're a Fortune 10 company versus a 20-person company. If you lose your client list, you're really in a world of hurt.
Yeah, definitely. And from a reputation too, if the word gets around, even with a smaller business today, if you get hacked, that's not a good thing for the reputation of your organization.
Right. And it is users. A majority of threats that enter a network today come in via email. So um, it starts with a good offense. I mean, you just need to get proactive about preventing threats from coming into the network, educating your clients, your end users, training them over time. Again, it's a constant movement. It's not a set it and forget it type of scenario anymore with security.
Excellent point. So, Amy, you've had an opportunity to look at the channel concerns from both sides of the fence, which is great from a vendor perspective. I know I've worked with a few vendors over the years that have your experience. It's not a lot, though. So, you've been both, an MSP and now an executive in the vendor community for several years. How have the security threats evolved over the past few years, and do providers really need to up their game on their own? I know it's a two-part question, but what are your thoughts on the evolution of the security threats and where providers
Sure.
need to go?
Well, again, a cybersecurity plan and solution set is just no longer a nice to have. It's an absolute necessity today. And relying on just one or two things, one or two tools, one or two approaches is just no longer cutting it. The bad guys are just smarter, faster, and very well resourced. So we really need to look at this from a layered perspective and look at this really as a full-time initiative as opposed to just an add-on or another service that we offer today. We meaning the MSP channel.
So the discussion is more proactive. I know we hit on this earlier, but it's almost a mindset change from what I've seen for not just sales teams, but the account management teams and anybody who's working with customers today is putting security at the forefront. It's not just about are you using desktop solutions and other things, but it's about the processes being used, password protection, all of those different layers you discussed. Is it's almost you have to do education from the inside of a VAR business too, and making sure an MSP business, making sure that all of your team understands the security focus and what the roles are.
Exactly. And what we're finding is MSPs are having conversations with their customers because there's so much in the news about big breaches that we all know about, and their customers are coming to them now saying, hey, I know you're managing my network, but could this happen to me? And so that's a great thing. The hesitation, I think, that's palpable in the channel is that as we talked about, security truly is an area of specialty. So if MSPs don't have that expertise in-house, they are a little bit worried about answering that question of whether their customers are protected fully and won't have a breach or a reputation, a scar on their reputation and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what we're here for, is to help deliver that peace of mind, knowing that they've got a team of security professionals in their back pocket 24/7, helping them actually deliver that true protection that their customers are looking for.
So it sounds like you spend a fair amount of time doing consulting with your partners as well as helping them nurture them in their business, not just giving them the tools to work with. Is that correct?
Right, right. Well, it's an education, just like it's educating the end user not to click on that link. It's an education to help our partners understand, what needs to be done at each layer, and how to do it, when to do it, and what their role is in all of that. So, and how, and then we talk about the business side. How can they be successful and profitable in delivering these types of services? So, yes, we spend a ton of time talking to partners and helping with that roadmap.
It's an extremely dynamic part of the channel. I think that's the one challenge I've seen is for, and most MSPs understand, in my opinion, most of them understand the importance of security. They just need to understand how to transition their business so that they're offering everything that their clients need. And that, I think, has been the biggest challenge for those that have been in the industry for 10 or 20 years, is that change of mindset and looking for assistance in making that leap or that jump over within their business, as well as how to educate their customers. So it's good to have access to all of those resources.
Totally agree. And you asked about challenges, and I talked a little bit about how expensive it is to bring the technologies and the expertise in house. But there's also the challenge of having that conversation with the customer about paying for security, right? Because it's hard when you have legacy solutions today that are very commoditized and super cheap. And when an MSP has, built their standard service offering, and that standard service offering includes some of these legacy, I'm calling them legacy solutions in the sense that, and I'll use antivirus as an example. We have legacy antivirus solutions available today, and that's evolving very quickly to advanced malware protection, which is machine learning and math and all these other things that are more proactive rather than signature-based reactive technologies. But the new advanced malware technologies are more expensive than your commoditized stuff that's signature-based. So, and that's technical, right? I mean, that's not just a price conversation. That's educating the end user. Okay, well, this is why we choose these technologies and wrap our services around this in order to protect you from that. So it's education all the way across down to the end user in how to implement this and how to protect themselves.
So you mean I can't just use that free software that came with my laptop?
Exactly. And I guess in that sense, it's an age-old challenge, right?
Yeah, except as you mentioned, it's much more complex now and extends further down the ecosystem within, every end user, not just the people making the IT buying decisions.
Exactly.
So, well, great. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation today, Amy. Do you have any final thoughts before we close? Things you'd like to talk about as far as Infogressive or the channel and where you see us going in 2018?
I think this is an exciting time in the channel. There's so much disruption with cloud and cybersecurity and Internet of Things and all this stuff that's happening, which can be a challenge. But I think on the flip side of that, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to innovate on service delivery today in the channel. So to me, that's exciting. And specifically in cybersecurity, to me, it feels kind of like the new frontier, right? So
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to figure out how to do this right and correct and cost effectively and profitably and all of that. So I think it's a very fun and exciting time, and I'm super grateful, to be a part of the Infogressive team.
Well, that's awesome. On behalf of IOTSA, I'd like to thank Amy Luby of Infogressive for joining us today. And for those of you who tuned in to listen to our discussion, I'd also encourage you to take a few extra minutes and check out all the great cybersecurity content on the association's website. That's iotssa.com. Thanks again, and please have a fantastic and secure day.